How you guys doing today? I haven't talked to you guys in a while. Lots been going on. Got a pretty good video for y'all today. Um, if you haven't already done, like, subscribe to the channel, comment, let me know what you think about some of the things that we're doing and that I'm doing. Um, oof. um, we're coming up on National Signing Day, so I took the time out to look up some of the more talented teams in college football history, and obviously we can put a slew of Ohio State teams in there, a slew of Alabama, a lot of Florida State teams, a lot of Miami teams, a lot of USC teams, um, some of Michigan teams, but overall I tried to give these teams their importance and their place, and some of them were close, but no cigar. So with that being said, ooh, let me stretch a little bit. With that being said, I'm going to give you these teams and feel free to comment. This is opinion, so you can chime in and let me know what you think about it. Maybe I had a team in the wrong place. Maybe I didn't have your team on there, but I tried to think of the best teams and the most talented teams. So in the process of doing this video, I do want people to understand that it's not always a national championship that validates your talent, or it's not always the record and the ranking, because some of these teams have lost the national championship game. Some of these teams were close and lost in the championship but didn't make it. The 2002 Miami team lost to um, Ohio State. I think if you asked 100 people, you would probably find at least over 60 people that would think Miami was the better team and the more talented team. Um, Florida State lost to Tennessee. Alabama lost to Georgia just recently, and I want people to understand something, that the game was not in Tuscaloosa, not in Athens, or not in Atlanta, and I think Alabama on paper um, had a overall from top to bottom better team. Georgia had just as much talent as them, but I think Alabama was a little deeper, but Georgia wanted it more. So when I say these things, sometimes it doesn't equal national championship for certain teams or certain venues or anything, what have you. So take it with a grain of salt, but I think I um, done some research and looked through the history and annals, and I came up with a list that recognizes to me the most talented teams to ever be assembled to date in college football from the start to now. So I'm going to give you that list. You guys, excuse me, I hope you guys have had a tremendous week and a tremendous weekend, and now we're going to get ready to go back into Monday tomorrow. So without further ado, I'm going to give you the most talented teams that I think have ever graced the field. And I'm going to start with my number 15 team, which is going to be the Oklahoma Sooners. I think that's wrong. Not Oklahoma Sooners, I'm sorry. This is going to be the 1987 Oklahoma State Cowboys. And the reason why I had this team ranked, because at the time you had Thurman Thomas, who had a young running back nipping on his heels by the name of Barry Sanders. Now a lot of people may say, well, they didn't play for a national championship, but I think they did a tremendous job in the time frame and with that type of talent. This is before Jimmy Johnson, he left and went to Miami, but this team was loaded and they did very, very well in their conference and on the national scene. They had a great Holiday Bowl. But obviously we know Barry Sanders, we know Thurman Thomas. So at the time with these running backs, I don't really think you probably could say you had two better running backs that went to the NFL. I know people will say, well, look at Miami with Portis and all these guys. I'm sorry. Um, Willis McGahee is by far the greatest running back in Miami history in only one season. A lot of people will dance around Adrian James, and there's no disrespect for him, but Adrian James is no Willis McGahee. So I have the 1987 Oklahoma State Cowboys as one of the 15 most talented teams ever assembled in that time frame. My number 14 team is going to be the 1997 Michigan Wolverines. Obviously, we know Charles Woodson played on that team, and they split the national championship that year, which was put us in now the BCS. We went to the BCS era, and now we're in the playoff era. So I think people tend to forget just how talented that team was from top to bottom. I want to reiterate something. Um, a lot of times, my definition of teams that are talented is the players that are leaving, the players that are on the roster, the players that are on the sideline waiting to play, and then the incoming freshmen or future recruits. And when you have all that mesh, you get something special. So a lot of times people will just look at the starters, but you have to look at the depth of a team and how deep and how talented a team was. So that's kind of where I get my notion for who's more talented or who's not. And this is again just my opinion. So moving along, I do have the 2018 Clemson Tigers right along in that 14th spot. I don't really think this was Dabo's best team. Obviously they didn't win, but this was the most talented team from his stretch run from 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18. This team really jailed, and he did a good job of recruiting and bringing some talent in. And all this stuff is pre-transfer portal. So I think the 2018 Clemson Tigers obviously lost the national championship game, but they were very deep and very talented. My number 13 team, my number 13 team, I have the 2002 and the 1994 Miami Hurricanes. Obviously, the 2002 Hurricanes lost in the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl to Ohio State, and the 94 Hurricanes got beat basically at a home game against Nebraska in the Orange Bowl. I think both of those squads were deep and loaded. Both of those squads were deep and loaded. They're not Miami's one of their better teams, but they were definitely in the top 5 teams, and those teams were deep. Obviously, any team Sean Taylor's on. You talk about Ray Lewis on that '94 team, Warren Sapp. That they had a deep, talented team. So those are two teams I think people tend to forget about, but they were very talented group. Now my number 12 team would be the 1967 USC Trojans. They had a superstar running back by the name of Orenthal James Simpson, and this team was very talented. Obviously, they had a huge showdown with UCLA at the Coliseum, and we simply had what they called the run. But USC was deep. They were very talented. They had a lot of depth, and O.J. Simpson was the centerpiece back then. So a lot of people tend to forget just how talented that team was. Now moving along, we're going to number 11, the 2011 Alabama Crimson Tide. I don't think this is one of Nick Saban's all-time teams he's had in Tuscaloosa, but I like the 2011 Crimson Tide more than their first national championship, and I do like them more than maybe say the 12 or the 15 team. I think 2011, obviously they lost to LSU, but they got their revenge in the national championship. But that team was loaded. That team had depth in just about every position: running backs, wide receiver, offensive line, defensive line. They were real deep in linebacker and tremendously deep in the secondary. And then I move on to the 2007 Florida Gators too, right there in that range with Alabama. That team was deep, and one of the reasons why I have this team on the roster is because you did have, Cam Newton on the bench, Tebow, a young Tebow, and you had Chris Leak. So you had a deep quarterback room. You had a lot of talent, a lot of speed on the field. At this time, Florida had a lot of wide receivers and running backs, and I think people tend to forget just how deep that team was at the quarterback position. So I have them right there at number 11. Now, number 10, I'm going to have the 1888 Yale. I'm going to have Yale ranked right there And a lot of people tend to forget this team right here had one of the longest winning streaks in college football in their day. So when you start to win over 30 games, that means you're putting together some undefeated seasons and you're beating everybody you're playing against. So I do have them up there also with the 1970 Toledo. They won a lot of games, deep roster, great talent, recruiting, coaching, and development. So I do have those teams right where I think where they should be as teams hovering around the top 10 greatest teams of all time. Now, number 9, I have the 1975 Ohio State Buckeyes coming in with the 1995 Nebraska Cornhuskers. That's to me, people tend to forget Archie Griffin won 2 Heisman trophies. This is one of Woody Hayes' best teams. They went undefeated. I want to say they may have captured the national championship that year, but anytime you can win 2 Heisman trophies and you were better than your first Heisman Trophy season, means you had to have a tremendous quarterback, you had to have great coaching staff, and you had to have an offensive line. They were deep, they were talented, and in '75 they took care of business. Moving right along, this is a familiar face, familiar name. Um, Number 8, I have 3 teams. I have the 1996 Florida Gators. For a long time, the SEC was defense, 3 yards in a cloud of dust, and it wasn't until Steve Spurrier got there, and obviously when he left, then Mark Richt came, Saban, some of the other coaches, they kind of raised the quarterback level, and you start to really have elite quarterback play in the SEC. But before that, it was Hal Mumme and Kentucky, and then Steve Spurrier. And the 1996 Gators are I think one of the deepest teams probably in Florida's history, from top to bottom, from the defense and offense, and especially in the quarterback room. They were very deep, and they had the Heisman Trophy winner that year. I went into the game at Doak Campbell Stadium, and then the rematch in New Orleans, so you have to watch the video for that. But that was a very deep team, and I got 2 other teams. I have the 1996 Florida State Seminoles and the 1997 Florida State Seminoles. Those teams kind of laid the groundwork for the dominance of Florida State. The 1996 and 97 Noles were kind of the foundation of recruiting for what would turn out to be the 98 team, the 99, and obviously the 2000 team. And they took a step back in 01, but 02 and 03 they had enough talent on the roster, which I've done a video, so you have to look at that, where they could have competed, and I think those teams could have won national championships, but you just have to watch the video, no need to go into it. But particularly why I have those 2 teams on there is because they both lost to Florida at the time when they were number 1. That definitely does cost them a national championship, but the depth on that team and the overall talent, when you talk about a Rock Preston bagging up a Warrick Dunn, Thad Busby, then you transition to Chris Winkie, the receiver core, the defense. I really think those 2 teams were laying the foundation for what would be a run of 3 straight national championships. So that's why I have them ranked at number 8. Now, number 7, I have the 2014 Ohio State Buckeyes, and they won a national championship, beat Alabama in essentially a home game in New Orleans, and they did it with a bag-up quarterback. So that's when you know you're talented. They had Zeke at running back. That team probably can line up and play in any time frame, anywhere, any day, and if not win, you're not going to beat them by much. And I have obviously one of the greatest one-hit wonders, the 2018 LSU Tigers. No, excuse me, the 2019 LSU Tigers. Sorry, wrong year, off by a year. But definitely one of the reason why I don't have them higher is because the year before they were kind of middle of the road. The year after, it was continuous drop to ultimately Ed Orgeron was fired. But 2019, that team was very special. Joe Burrow, and obviously we know how potent that offense was. So I have them right there with the 2014 Ohio State Buckeyes. Now we're moving on to number 6, and this team has got to be on your list, or you have to consider them, because they have the all-time longest winning streak at 47 games. I don't care what time it is, what year, what date. The 1956 Oklahoma Sooners, I think, was the best team out of that stretch, and you know, you win 47 straight games. You are doing something right. You're recruiting right. You're coaching right. You're calling the right plays, and you've got a slew of talent. You got a plethora of talent. So I rank the Sooners 6th. Now, before I get into the top 5, I want to mention that the 2014 Florida State team was close. The 2000 Florida State team was close. I think the 74 Ohio State Buckeyes were close. I could go with any of these, any era in the playoff era, Nick Saban Alabama teams, but for some reason or another, obviously how the 2014 team lost to Oregon, you take that away. But when you're talented enough to go back undefeated, 29 game winning streak, you should have been on there. So they were close, no cigar, and I just want y'all to know that. So it was a few teams that was close, but they didn't make it. So my number 5 team would be, and this really is a surprise, but this should be number 1, but it's not. It's the 1999 Florida State Seminoles. I think at this time, this is the pinnacle of Bobby Bowden's coaching and success. And like I say, I could have had this team number 1 just as well as I could have had the '88 Florida State team on the list, but because they ran their mouth and did the video and got laid to slaughter in the first game against Miami, they just missed the cut. But the 1999 Noles, first team ever to start number 1, finish number 1. Not only was it Peter Warrick, not only was it the running back depth, the wide receiver depth, it's the defense. This is the height of Mickey Andrews, and a lot of people don't understand. Mickey played almost 35, 40 players a game. So he played 3 deep, and he always played next year's defense, and they were just loaded with talent. This was the benefit from that 96 team and the 97 team, and this team was deep, and this team was talented. Could have been higher, but I mean, you're in for a tough, long, physical day playing against that 1999 team that I have ranked at number 5. Number 4 team is going to be the 2005 Southern California Trojans. This team right here, if it was not for Texas, would have won 3 straight national championships. They split a national championship with LSU. LSU obviously taking the AP because they got the trophy, and USC took the coaches poll because at that time you didn't have to, you weren't bound to make either team number 1. The coaches poll and AP was 2 separate entities at the time, and they didn't have to, you know, be the same. So the AP voted LSU because LSU defeated Oklahoma in the Sugar Bowl, and then Carson Palmer and USC won. I think they beat Iowa in the Orange Bowl, and they won the national championship, and that kind of started it. In '04, they just ran all over Oklahoma, ran all over them in the Rose Bowl. No, they played Iowa in the Rose Bowl. I'm sorry. Then they played USC. USC played Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl, and they just it was ugly. After the coin toss, was ugly. But the 2005 team, I think, was the best team that Pete Carroll had. He had there. So that's why I ranked them as the 4th best, most talented team of all time. They were deep at running back. They had 5-star quarterbacks that ain't even saw the field behind Matt Leinart. Wide receivers, they was deep. Linebackers, 3, 4 guys made the NFL. They were deep in the secondary, so this was their best team to me at USC at the 2014. Now, a lot of people may not agree with this, but I think this was Nick Saban's best team at Alabama. At number 3, I had the 2018 Alabama Crimson Tide, and I know they got smoked by Clemson in California, but before this team came along, it you saw teams score points, teams light it up, but you really didn't kind of have that kind of Steve Spurrier Florida Gators feel. And Nick Saban kind of turned the offense loose, and Tua, and you had behind Tua, you had Mac Jones, and you had Jalen Hurts. You had a plethora of wide receivers. You had a lot of secondary talent, and this team was destroying teams by 42 points a game almost. They were killing teams. They struggled in the SEC championship but beat Georgia. They beat Oklahoma in the national semifinal, and then they just came in and Clemson just took them to the woodshed. But this team is one of the most talented teams to ever step on field in college football. I mean, they were killing guys. I mean, they were bombing. I mean, like the second play of the game, you turn around and it's the third, fourth play, you're down by 21 points. Like, this Alabama team was lighting people up. So that's why I have them at number 3. Now, moving to number 2, I have the 2013 Florida State team. The only reason why this is number 2 and the 99 team's not higher is because all 22 starters were in the NFL. I don't think outside of the quarterback and your defensive backs and your defensive linemen, the offensive line was great. You had a lot of the deepest offensive line probably in Florida State history, but I do not think they had the best receiver corps. But when you get all 22 guys and plus your field goal kicker make it to the NFL and start and play, make a roster, there's nothing else you can say. All 22 starters on the field were in the NFL. This team was great. I think they set the record for most points in the regular season at the time. And this team, until they ran into Auburn in the national championship game, were putting teams to rest by halftime. I went to the Orange Bowl January 1st, 2013, and they kind of carried that momentum into the season. I went to the Florida State-Miami game, which at the time, both of those teams were undefeated. It was a good game in the first half, and the second half they destroyed them. And then I also traveled out to Gainesville, and if it wasn't for a couple of drops, Calvin Benjamin could have easily had 300, 400 yards receiving. This team was lighting folks up offensively, and this is probably the best Jameis Winston was in his 2 years of playing at the time at Florida State. So that leaves us with one more team. Obviously, I think everybody kind of knows who it is, but I'm going to say it. You cannot argue with the 2001 Miami Hurricanes. Do I think the 99 Noles can beat them? Yes. Do I think the 13 Florida State can beat them? Yes. Do I think the 2015 Ohio State can keep it close or kick a field goal and win? Yes. But at the time this team played, they beat us, which I consider to be one of the greatest games in college football history. In 2000 in the Orange Bowl, I think that's Chris Winke's greatest game, period. And really, outside of a loss, one of the best games Florida State ever played under Bobby Bowden. But they were motivated and focused because they lost to Washington, beat Florida State, but didn't make the national championship. And this team came out. You had Ed Reed starting, Sean Taylor bagging up, McGahee on the bench, a young Andre Johnson. You had a lot of talent that didn't even play. And this team went out and laid to rest everybody. And if you watch the national championship game against Nebraska, a lot of people seem to think it was over when Vince Wilfork picked up their superstar all-world guard and just threw him in the backfield. But I think the game was over from the kickoff. I think Nebraska came out. It was a Midwest kind of big, more like a instead of a Big 12, they were built like a a Big Ten team, and they came out big, slow, big offensive linemen, not a lot of speed at skill position. I think a couple of Miami defensive linemen were fast and Eric Crouch, and they just kind of looked like they was going to impose their will on Miami. And I think, like I say, from the opening kickoff, Miami looked bigger, stronger, and faster. They were just hitting them. Jonathan Veal with 2 dream hits as a linebacker. You don't get that. And if you really watch that game, they literally took them men's soul. They took their heart. Like that Miami was deep, fast, bigger and stronger, and it all came ahead that night in the Rose Bowl, and it was on full display for the nation to see the separation in talent. That's a huge talent gap. Like it was not even close. I think Miami's walk-ons could have beat Nebraska by 10 points. And if it wasn't for Miami taking their foot off the gas, they probably could have scored 100 points. Like, I'm telling you, it was not close. It was like grown men versus babies. Miami did whatever they wanted to do offensively, defensively. Ken Dorsey, Andre Johnson, Clinton Portis, Ed Reed, DJ Williams, you can name them. They did whatever they wanted to do. There was nothing. Nebraska didn't have an answer. Remember, Brian Kelly said, "I hope Alabama don't come out after halftime." I guarantee you, Frank Solich was probably thinking, "Can we even score?" But of course, Miami took their foot off the gas and coasted on in. But if you look at that time, 2001, and you had Ohio State, you had a USC coming. Alabama wasn't there yet. Florida wasn't there yet. Florida State was still hovering. It was a good time in college football. The early 2000s were a good time because you had a lot of teams that were really starting to come into their own. And obviously my team kind of started to slide, but it was just a great time. So guys, I hope y'all like this video. Um, some of the top teams in the country will play. Um, like I say, I don't want to get into any other details like that. I got some other videos coming out, but I hope you guys enjoy the video. I think next I'll have the Florida State top 10 offensive linemen, and I'll probably have the top 5 tight ends and top 5 fullbacks. And then I'm going to do another video on the 25 greatest running backs in college football history. So you guys have a great, wonderful week, and I'll see you later. Go Noles.